Hello, class, and welcome to the Chapter 3 labs. So I'm going to walk through a couple techniques that you can use to determine what your fixed costs and your variable costs are from a set of data, which is helpful if you know what your overall costs are and you know how many units you've produced, but you don't necessarily know exactly which of your costs are fixed and which are variable. So here we've got in our document here quarterly data for website production for a company and the costs associated with producing those websites. So they have two different types of websites that they produce. We're going to be just looking at the total number of websites and the total costs today. And the first method for Lab 2, and this is the one that is in the Connect assignment, is to use the high-low method to calculate what the fixed and variable costs would be for this data. Now, they have us looking at specifically the most recent 8 quarters here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 14 through 21. So I'm going to highlight these just, and I'm going to hint these so that we can keep track of which numbers we're looking at under this high-low method. So what we want to look at here for the high-low method is you take the change in cost divided by the change in units, all right? Which means with respect to variable cost, we can figure out, okay, this is how much cost changes over a range of units and how many units were associated with that. And that way we can isolate what the variable costs are per unit within our relevant range. So here we've got, we want to look through here and look at what is the high number and what is the low number. So it looks like 44 is our high here for websites, and the costs associated with that are 59,920. And then the low, it looks like 23 is the low here. And the cost is 34,689 here. Now, I've hard-coded this, which is an absolute no-no. So I'm actually going to take this, I'm going to make it into a cell reference here. So this is from cell D14. And you show that when I type that in there, it highlights it. And this is from cell D16. And so we've got that. And then because these costs are just to the right of the websites, I can actually take this, copy it, and drag it to the right, and it will change that and replace it with the codes. So I highlight that now. It's E14 and E16. All right, so that's one way of doing this, of linking to those. But notice I've referenced specific cells, which is not the ideal, unless those values that we want are always going to be in those cells. So I'm gonna just, I'll come back to this in a minute here. Now, to calculate our variable cost, we want to get our change in cost for the numerator. So I'm going to put a parenthesis here, and I'm going to take the high cost in H2 and subtract the low cost in H3. And by using a cell reference, that means that if the cells that are or numbers that are in those cells change, my formula will still calculate correctly. So I'm going to take, oops, I'm sorry, I did this backwards. I did the units there. That's going to be our denominator. So I'm actually going to fix this by clicking in front of it, put a new parenthesis here, and I want to do the change in cost, which is I2 minus I3 for my numerator. And then I'm going to insert a slash, which is the divider. So now I have a formula here for the change in cost, high minus low, divided by the change in websites, high minus low. And when I hit enter, that is the amount that I get. So now I can solve for my fixed cost. If you remember, our total costs are equal to our variable costs plus our fixed costs. And so if we know, and then our total variable cost is equal to the variable cost per unit times the number of units. So I can calculate my fixed cost by saying my total cost of 59,920. Actually, I'm going to do my cell reference, I2, minus my number of units, which is in cell H2, times my variable cost per unit, which is in H5. That should get me my fixed cost. So my total cost minus my total variable cost here. And that gets me to $7,055, okay? So now that I know what those are, I can make an estimate for how much it will cost me to produce 40 websites. I'm gonna put equals, and for my variable cost, I'm gonna take 40 websites times my variable cost in H5, close that parentheses, and I'm gonna add to that my fixed cost, which is in H6, okay? And that gets me to my estimate for 40 websites. Now, so that's one method, the high-low method. Please note that currently in the lab, it's asking for you to use the high-low method, but it actually wants you to submit answers using a very simple regression method that is out there. So I'm going to show you how to do a very simple regression. In the lab here for lab 2, it asks us to look at a scatter plot for these cells right here. So from row 13 through 21. And so I'm just going to look at this really quick here, double check that I'm grabbing the correct rows that I want to get there. Actually, no, I'm sorry. It's quarter 3 through quarter 21. So I'm going to run that here. I'm going to highlight those cells, and I'm going to go up here to insert, and then the scatter plot that we've used in the past. And I'm just going to do a generic scatter plot here because I want to show you if you just start off with a regular scatter plot of these cells, if you go to the chart elements menu here, you can add a trend line that will basically run a linear regression here that tracks the overall regression that's going on here. And so I'm going to click here. I'm going to go down to more options, and I have the ability to display the linear equation that it's mapping out in the chart. And so this is what it's showing me here for this chart. And then I do have the ability here, if I wish to do so, to look at a different range. And I am going to change this range here to include my cell 13 here. So if I click on here and I right click, I can go in here and I can do select data. I'm going to change this to D13 and update that. And that gets me to 11:15:50 here. And it appears that we have some different data here from what is out there in the textbook. And I'm not certain why that is. So I'm not getting the same numbers that they have there. So just be aware of that. They also ran this for a different set that was out here, which was cells D14 through D16. So there's a couple different ways that we can run this out here, depending on how we want to do it. So in the textbook, they have another one where they ran it for just let's see, so repeating the exercise using the data from all available quarters rather than just the current quarter. So let's try running that again for all the quarters. And so all the quarters would start us here in D2. And that gets us to, so I'm going to run this here. Just make sure I'm not running anything incorrectly here. And that gets me to 1179.1. All right, so when you complete your lab, please make sure that you check which quarters they're wanting you to run that for. So this is an analysis of all 20 quarters. You're going to want to check in the lab which quarters to run this for. And although it says to use the high-low method, you're going to want to use this regression method because that's what gets you to the answers that are out in the assignment. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scrap this one and I'm going to go over to a blank version of this same file that's out here that is shown for lab 3. Now, here for lab 3, I wanted to show you another method of running a regression that's out here that uses the data analysis tool pack. So looking at this, if I highlight this data right here and I go to data, over to analyze, to data analysis, and if you don't have the data analysis tool pack installed, there are directions in the textbook under the lab 3.3 on how to do this. Make sure that you have this data analysis add-in available to you. So please reach out and check that if you don't find that you have this option in your Excel. Okay, so I'm going to regression here because we want to run a linear regression because our cost formula that we looked at actually uses a simple linear regression formula, which I can talk about here for a second. Now, our Y range is going to be our output range that we want to look at here. So for the Y range that is out there, we're going to want to select column E. I'm going to click and drag on column E. And now notice it's selecting the whole column. We want to make sure we have labels checked here so that it recognizes that the first row is a text and not a numeric value. I'll show you what happens if you don't push that here. I'm going to go down to our other cell here and select this, and I'm going to leave the labels unchecked, and it's going to give me an error here, right? So, oh, your input range contains non-numeric data. I'm going to bring this back. If I check this label, then it'll automatically assume that that first line is data, and then I can go ahead and click OK, and it's going to run the regression here. Now, this is running what is actually a very standard regression output that you would see in a lot of different kinds of statistical analysis software. And so the most simple and important parts that we're going to look at for in terms of this course are going to be these coefficients here, which I'm going to highlight, and then also the R-square here in our regression statistics. Okay. Also, sometimes we'll look at standard error, which is like how much and how many observations we have. So the observations is how many data points did we have? The standard error is the typical squared variance or degree of variation, a measure of variation or inconsistency. How widely do our numbers vary? And then the R-squared here is a measure of how effective our model, our linear regression model is for predicting changes in values based on number of units associated with it. So here we have an R-squared of 0.84, which tells us that 84% of the variation in the output variable, which is total cost, is predicted by our model. okay? And so what is our model, right? So the linear equation that applies to cost analysis here is that total costs are equal to variable costs plus fixed costs. And a normal linear equation, if you look at it, is y equals mx plus b, right? Where m is the slope. And if I were to draw, actually, let me grab a little annotator here. Just draw this out. All right. So if I was to draw a line here, let's make this black so we can see it a little bit better. Here, all right. So if I were to draw a graph here and I had a line that looked like this, right? The slope is the change in rise, like so change in height divided by the change in run. How much does it go up for every unit it goes over, right? That's the same thing we have here for variable costs. So our formula for variable costs is our total cost equals the variable cost per unit times the number of units, where the number of units is how many units to the right we go, and then the variable cost is how much does our line go up based on each unit we move to the right. So the slope, in other words. So our variable cost per unit is equal to the slope in our regression formula, okay? So what that means is that these coefficients are telling us what is the equation for this line for our costs. So in this case, our total cost is equal to the total number of websites, 1179.13, times the number of websites. So the cost per website times the number of websites, plus our fixed cost, which is where the line hits this y-intercept. So when our number of websites is 0, the variable costs will be 0. They will intercept here. So plus our fixed cost, and in this case, our fixed cost that it's calculating is 10,401.87. Okay. So what we can do then is if we want to figure out, hey, what's our estimated number of costs for 40 websites, we can take the amount that we have in B18, multiply it times 40, so that's the 1179, and we can add B16, and that's going to give us, whoops, what did I do here? B18 times 4. Oh, whoops, wrong. B17. There we go. Wrong cell reference there. It says you're trying to add text. You can't do that. Okay. That's give me, based on what I ran here, an estimated cost for 40 websites. So I just wanted to walk you through this regression output. We'll talk about some other aspects of regression outputs as we get later into the semester, but that should get you where you need to go with some tools for solving the Chapter 3 lab. Please let me know if you have any questions.